Welcome to the Digital Responsibility Podcast. There is a vibrant community around the world exploring how we drive forward digital innovation, products and services, and generally exploit technology progression for the sustained benefit of society and the planet. On this podcast, you will hear from me, Christopher Joinson, and Rob Price, two of the original founders of Corporate Digital Responsibility, as we speak to our guests to hear their stories and piece together what it means to be responsible in the digital age. If you'd like to learn more, take a look at the website, corporatedigitalresponsibility.net.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Digital Responsibility Podcast. Tonight we're going to talk about a really exciting project across Europe, CDR Europe. Delighted to be joined by Jessica and Eleanor. And Jessica, would you like to kick off and introduce yourself and perhaps kind of talk a bit about the CDR Europe project to start with?
Yeah, hi Rob, hi Eleanor. So I work for a company based in Florence called Resolvo. We're a consultancy company. We work on a number of different projects to support responsible and sustainable development. And here today, particularly because we've been working on CDR with micro enterprises in Tuscany, but also because we're supporting the coordinating partner of the CDR Europe project that's the focus of our conversation today. The project kicked off in March, and it has co-funding from the European Union through the Cohesion Fund and then specifically the Interreg Europe programme. And for anyone that maybe is not familiar with that programme, Interreg Europe is designed to support exchange of experience between public authorities across Europe, and they're supposed to use that experience to improve public policy in a specific area. In our case, the project is designed to support 7 European territories to understand better the concept of corporate digital responsibility and design policy measures that can help small and medium enterprises to put corporate digital responsibility into action.
Excellent. And I mean, we've talked about it before in the context of blogs and previous kind of conversations, but to see that happen and to kind of see, because that's a lengthy time and a lengthy focus across multiple areas in Europe, was really exciting. And it was great to be part of that kickoff session that you led in Italy. So fantastic to have you. And Eleanor, would you like to introduce yourself as well? Because it was really exciting. And I have to mention this, but for you to be involved, because we're literally almost only previously released the Romanian translation of the CDR manifesto. And I should say thanks to Nicoletta and Ioana who helped with that. But Elena, would you like to share a bit more about who you are and the organisation that you're working for?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, Rob. Hi, Jessica. I'm an international projects expert. That's a name. For 9 years now, working for the Research and Innovation Funding Agency in Romania with a funny acronym, CDR. And us as a funding agency with regional focus, but also with national focus, work a lot in international, transnational, global funding schemes. Our main focus and my main role is as a delegate to different management boards that work towards supporting urban sustainable development, green energy transition, clean energy transition. So everything that relates to climate neutrality targets in Europe. Myself, as part of the agency, I'm also the coordinator of capacities. That's a CSA that works in 15 European countries to support the implementation of the Horizon Europe mission cities. As a funding agency, we like to call ourselves an agent of change. So that's why I think we joined CDR Europe.
Excellent. And was CDR a term that you were familiar with before then, or was it something that you've become more familiar with as you've been part of the project?
that was definitely part of this project. When we joined the consortium, we found out what CDR is, but it's not new to us. And it somehow answered the responsible innovation dimension we are dealing with in our organization and in our funding instruments. So to us, it was somehow meeting the organizational values in terms that we dream, of course, to build an inclusive environment and climate-friendly environment, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Jessica, how does that then correlate back to the experiences of perhaps some of the other countries? Because I would imagine that different regions are familiar or not less familiar with the CDR concepts. But as most people say to me when I've talked about CDR, even if they're not familiar with CDR as a term, the content of the framework is logical and makes sense and correlates to the initiatives that they've got underway.
I think so. We've got 7 territories involved in this project. Obviously, Elena is representing in Romania. We've also got partners from Hungary, Italy, Finland, Ireland, and France, and Catalonia in Spain. So they're all over Europe. In terms of what they have in common, that these are all partners that are in some way or another involved in supporting the digitalization process in small and medium enterprises. And this means looking at digitalization in different sectors of the economy. So in Catalonia and in Ile-de-France, the Paris region, they have big startup communities on sort of advanced digitalization. But obviously in other places we have more traditional sectors like the gold production in Arezzo or food production in Finland, and all over we have the question of how digitalization is impacting on sectors like tourism and manufacturing. So to some extent, all the partners start from that sort of common needs. They need to digitalize, and I actually expected there to be maybe more differences in terms of the levels of maturity of CDR. But what I found, and perhaps Elena, you can see if you agree with this, is that so far none of the regions can say that they are particularly mature in terms of the understanding and the implementation of CDR. Some are more advanced. So the Paris region and Ile-de-France, they've run a sort of an extensive survey among a lot of the members of their digitalization cluster to find out about what they feel about CDR. They've set up working groups on the topic. But despite that, they're all really at a stage where it's about introducing this concept to SMEs. That doesn't mean, exactly like you said, that the SMEs know nothing. They're aware about different elements of the concept. There's a lot of awareness about cyber security, possibly because some have even experienced cyber attacks directly. There's a lot of awareness about, for example, data management, partly because of the legislation and the dreaded GDPR. There's other initiatives that it links up to, like ESG and other sort of environmental and social initiatives. So like you said, there's a lot that we can link up to, and that when people read about the CDR manifesto, that they can connect to and that they recognize. But what we found is that companies are not necessarily dealing with this as an overall approach and covering all of the different dimensions. And in fact, talking to the companies, for example, our partner in Ireland says that there's a need to show companies what is in it for them. Why should they be moving towards this approach? Our partner from Hungary said they'd been said, okay, potentially interesting, but make sure it doesn't become something that adds an extra administrative burden. So what we've been finding is that there's a need to sort of make companies more aware of what this CDR could be and how it could potentially benefit them.
And I think those are really valid and important points that you give there, because in a sense, organizations have enough to deal with keeping track of regulation and understanding how they should appropriately act. We've always positioned, or certainly in the conversations I've had, always positioned CDR as a holistic framework that was intended to help. So it wasn't intended to be about more regulation or more controls. It was just trying to kind of raise awareness of consequential impacts of things that you may choose to do. And certainly, as I've seen it applied within different industries or different territories or countries, then there are commonalities around some of the challenges that we face. But equally, there are I mean, you gave some examples of different industries that come to the fore and different. Therefore, I know that some people will be more impacted by environmental challenges than others who will focus on cybersecurity, than others that will focus on accessibility. But it always comes back to, it's not to say that there's an equal balance between every element of the manifesto. It's just to say, here's a thought out and research framework, and kind of understand how it might be applicable to you. I'd be really interested, Elena, to understand a bit more about that environment in Romania and that you see in terms of what you think the more relevant or the more high priority areas of the CDR framework are that are likely to play into the organizations that you're interacting with.
I somehow agree with Jessica, first of all, that when looking into our region and talking to our partners, we discovered that the level of awareness is low, and rather, how should I put it, it's listed under the CSR activities in most startups or SMEs we talked to. They tend to borrow this from the large corporations and just list a CSR activity in their, let's say, responsible dimension of the activity. I would say in Romania now, when we started, and we are really at early phase here with this project, we decided that it would be fit or suitable and also possible in our reach of activities to look at fair and equal opportunities, to all. And of course, again, mentioning the link to the climate neutrality, to look at the impact of the technology on the environment and climate, and also linked again to our social innovation dimension. We thought, and our database of stakeholders, let's say, we're thinking that promoting social well-being is a dimension of interest. However, the analysis we conducted through CDR Europe activities showed that we have a strength in the cybersecurity field. And maybe I get into details later on, but us as a region rank very high in terms of tech sector. We, for an example, Bucharest ranks 5th, if I'm not wrong, out of 25 cities in Europe in terms of opportunities for tech startups. So we have a lot of changes, opportunities that may defeat this threat. We are saying that CDI is not exactly very familiar to the SMEs we are working with.
But I think the key thing there for me is that point around, there is, even if it's not known as CDR, there is that strong understanding that says the pace of change of technology is kind of very quickly evolving. You're at the heart of it in terms of that tech innovation sector is important. And I mean, certainly I've talked to automation organizations, for example, based in Romania. I mean, some of the things that you're doing are globally relevant in terms of things that I've seen. But at the same time, I guess they're going to be familiar with things like AI regulations, for example, that are emerging from a European point of view, and therefore needing to be conscious of that balance and maybe familiarity with some of, I mean, you mentioned environmental Most of my days involve conversations at the moment around AI, generative AI, and large language models, which can do some amazing things, and I love that innovation side of it. But equally, I'm conscious of the environmental impact of the energy use of the supercomputers and the power needed. So I'm guessing that most people are in the midst of those type of conversations, but not necessarily familiar with the framework, if you like, to kind of bring those together. Do you have a view as to, or I mean, it's probably early days, but do you have a view as to some of the interesting things that you're hoping to get out of, for example, the next six to 12 months of the work that will give most value to you and indeed the SMEs that you engage with?
I would say so, at least for now, because we in general, when you bring in a new concept, and as I said, we like to call ourselves agents of change, right? When we bring in a new concept, we always do this raising awareness and trying to suit it or adapt it to the local needs and take the best out of it. That's how it works. In this case, we have selected these 3 areas I mentioned earlier. However, we may discover at the end or of the first year, or maybe at the end of the project, that we will have maybe ethics in AI as a main action that can be dealt with in national digital transformation policies or regional transformation policies. So I think the framework and the way to have this framework is a good way to start a work in whatever region. It gives you the right background to inform a future policy or to start discovering what's best to deal with. So I'm looking hopefully to this framework, and I know it's complex, but CDR has a lot of space to adapt and I don't know, deal with it at national level depending on what we get in our regions.
I mean, one of the things that we talked about 3 podcasts ago with the team in Norway was that they were really interested to understand what others were doing. So across Europe or even beyond, where were the great case studies of organizations or public sector or governments utilizing it as a framework to create positive impacts, but also kind of very conscious that it had to be relevant to their environment, their industries, their challenges that they were specifically facing within that. And Jessica, I guess one of the best examples of this project, because there are so many parts of Europe involved in this, I mean, kind of, as you say, 7 different territories, is just that collaborative opportunity to share experiences, to share some of the great stories that I've no doubt that people, as they engage with the broader team, are sharing. It'd be really interesting to hear your perspective on how that's played out so far, accepting that we're still at the start of the project.
So, yeah, I mean, I was really, really keen to do this project for 2 main reasons. One is exactly what you're saying, because it's an opportunity to exchange with different people from different countries and different, contexts about a topic that, is relatively new and as we said, complex. And I think it's not just about exchanging on what's been done well, but to some extent also exchanging on where the difficulties have been. So certainly at the next meeting, we're having some presentations from a stakeholder in Ireland that had been running a digital startup pilot and had huge difficulty involving SMEs, actually getting them to participate. So one of the things that we want to look at together is, how did, I keep saying it, I'm like a broken record, how do you get the SMEs engaged? And why have they not been involved in previous projects? Where has it worked? Where has it not worked? And where has it worked well? And in fact, the project's going to have a pilot action. We have funding from the programme to have a pilot action where 4 of the regions will test out a sort of a support mechanism for SMEs, to help them to assess their level of CDR maturity and to sort of put into place an initial CDR strategy. And that, I think, will be an interesting experience, even though it will be small numbers of companies, but to see, what it is that the public side can do. And Elena and her team will be one of the territories involved. And the other reason that I was particularly excited about this project is because Interreg Europe asks you to exchange, but it also asks you to go and actually make concrete change to policy. And so far, with our work with companies, we've found that at the moment, certainly, support from the public side in terms of funding, or in terms of other, soft measures, be it training or, other criteria that they can use to support, that's really been a driver for CDR. The companies that we've worked with said, sure, if the public can support us in this early phase, that would help. And that's what this project is hoping to do. So, for example, in Hungary and in France and in Italy, they've selected the European regional development programs at regional level that publish calls regularly to support SMEs. And their idea is to try and integrate the concept of CDR into some of the activities that can be funded directly. Whereas, going back to the question of cybersecurity, our partner from Catalonia is the Cybersecurity Agency. They have a cybersecurity strategy at regional level, and they're hoping to extend it so that it's not just cybersecurity, but it's also dealing with some of the other elements of CDR. So I think what we'll have, I hope, is some policies that will be adapted and changed, and good practices that will kind of emerge from that and from the work that we do together as well.
And I mean, there's two thoughts that I've got that build on that. So I'll start with the last part first. I mean, I'm involved in some initiatives and conversations at a global level with standards bodies, kind of looking at, for example, how do we understand the relationship between CDR and CSR at a standards level, and therefore kind of embed that. We've talked before about the UN Global Digital Compact, which was recently under consultation, that will hopefully kind of then result in some framework as an evolution or adjacent to the SDGs that help organizations. So there are things happening at a global level that are trying to kind of bring some of these threads together to help organizations. And we're all working to kind of try and do the right thing and help move things forward to create positive impacts and understand how we can measure positive impacts around that. What would be the most valuable inputs for you? And it's a question to both of you, really, as part of the program over the next few months. If people are listening to this, involved in some of those initiatives, what would be really helpful for the program, for whether it's reports or information or standards, or what would you kind of call out as really helpful?
I think I can talk for us, for our agency, for our region in Romania. And if Jessica mentioned earlier that we want to have a space for best practice exchange here, I think we would really like to get as many as concrete examples possible. We would like to get speakers, inspirational models to our regional events, for an example, or whoever would like to contribute in any way with some concrete experience would be helpful. That's what we need at this early stage. And that's my perspective from Romania. Jessica.
No, I think I would definitely agree. On the one hand, when you're working with companies and introducing new concepts, often what they say is, okay, but give me some practical examples. Tell me where this has happened, where a company's put this into place, what benefits they've got. So the more sort of case studies, I guess, as your Norwegians friends asked for as well last time, case studies, so that you can take the concepts and back them up with some sort of practical illustrations. I think that's something that all partners would be interested in. And the other thing, again, linked to what Elena said, I think if there are people listening from the regions and the territories that we're working in, they should definitely get in touch, because we should be working together on this. So if there's people that are based in Bucharest or are based in Tuscany or Cork in Ireland, they should be getting in contact and seeing what we can do together, because the project works at European level where we all exchange, but as Elena mentioned, we also have regional stakeholder groups, and working together on a sort of local, regional, national level. So there's plenty of space to involve people from the local context that might have something to contribute and or wish to learn from what the project's doing.
And I think the second point, going back to the earlier, which ties into that, is, Principle 5 talks about connecting enterprise organizations trying to drive change with ecosystems of innovative startups delivering services or products that help achieve some of these things. So actually, of course, on the website, we've tried to introduce the CDR marketplace recently to try and help that visibility. But what you're doing with this project is doing that on a much larger scale, because you'll find that naturally through the conversations and the collaboration that you've got. And I know that there are people that will be listening in Cork, for example. I can think of one that I need to connect to you because I haven't done so far. And of course, I know that there's activities that are happening in each of the in the territories. And Elena, I think there's kind of some workshops that you've got in Romania coming up. So could you both talk a bit more about maybe some of the next tangible things that are happening on the programme over the next kind of 2-3 months, just to illustrate some of the work that you're doing?
Sure, I guess I could start from project level. It was interesting that there was already translations of the CDR manifesto into all the languages that are in our project, except I think the Catalan one wasn't ready right at the start, and then it was ready.
That's there.
It's there now.
Yeah.
No, it's there now.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a perfect matchup. So right away, all the partners could access the manifesto in their own language, and I know that they have been sharing that with their stakeholders. So there's obviously stuff, other people working on this in those countries. What's next? We all the partners have been working on a sort of a SWOT analysis about CDR currently in their territory, and that's been a mixture of desk research and interviews and meetings with stakeholders. Interestingly, both with public stakeholders in terms of even sort of more responsibility within the public sector itself. So they have their digitalization strategies, but perhaps looking at how they could promote a more responsible use of digital technology within the public sector. And then, of course, how that they can support the SMEs and what the issues are for the moment with the SMEs. So soon we should have a sort of an overview of what's come out of that at interregional level, which I think will be an interesting result to share. And then we have our next meeting. We're going to Finland in October, and there we'll be looking in depth about some of the sort of more challenging issues that people have found with the CDR concepts. So like we said, with some of them, maybe they're more familiar, maybe cybersecurity is clearer, but there's some aspects that, they would like to go into in more detail. So we'll be looking on that. And then we're going to start with the sort of the looking for good practices, which I think will be challenging. So it's good practices about public support towards activities like this, and the pilot action as well is going to start already now. We have to start planning exactly how this pilot action to support the SMEs is going to start working. So we're going to be pretty busy, right, Elena?
As Jessica has just introduced the range of activities, we are part of those, and we really looked at this SWOT analysis regarding our region. That's how I discovered and mentioned earlier that we really have a cybersecurity strength, so to say, and it's really backed up by European landscape. So to name it, we have here in Bucharest the European Cybersecurity Center of Competence. So that connects the region quite a lot to the European funding, policy, and innovation environment, I would say. So coming back to the topic of activities, we are planning the first stakeholder workshop. It will be online. is 28th of July, so it is our first occasion to meet online the people, but to get a feeling on how people really look at CDR, or how we understand to communicate CDR in this phase. And then, of course, we will follow the updates of this analysis, looking deeper at what the maturity level could be. And we will try easily to embed as much as we can of our three main areas into our activities related to funding. But that takes time. So we don't want to make big promises, because from our previous experience with RRI, Responsible Research and Innovation, it takes time. It happens, but it really takes time.
It does. It does. So October in Finland sounds an interesting kind of place to be. Interestingly, last time I spoke on CDR in Finland was at a cybersecurity conference. So it's kind of clearly a good strong link between cybersecurity and CDR there. And of course, Finland's a great place because it's the home of lots of rock bands, which is utterly unrelated to CDR.
No, but that's always related.
So tell me a bit more about what would a great program look like for you, and I guess it is very targeted at both of you from a personal level almost. So what would you most like to get out of the program? What would you like to see happen? What's your hopes and aspirations for that?
I would like to see these policy changes that we mentioned. I'd like to have a small part in helping the public authorities that are involved to do something practical to go towards this. But for me, for myself, and for the job that I do as well, the question about the work directly with the SMEs and understanding how we can do exactly what you said, Rob, pass the message that this is something important, but not something that's supposed to cause burdens or unnecessary administrative procedures. It's something that if you start thinking about it, it could be integrated into your everyday work without too much of a hassle. And of course, that will vary a lot depending on what the companies we're working with, because you were talking about artificial intelligence and big data, but even on a much smaller level, the small company that produces sausages, but that needs to promote the digital skills because they have to digitalize their sales and production systems, but at the same time make sure people are aware of how they can make small changes to reduce the energy use. Those are the kind of things that little changes like that I would love to see supported by this project.
Elena?
And I think I can agree for sure. From our point of view, it would be very good to get this framework working and help us build some capacities within the team. It is very important to have team understanding the diversity of a concept and being able to tackle certain areas in their daily activity. That's our first aim, I think, out of this. And then, of course, personally, I would really like to see most of the companies embracing the aspect of their impact with technology on climate. That relates a lot with my current main activity. So I think it's important that a framework such as CDR builds capacity and paves the way towards different developments that may happen in a region or a country. And thirdly, I think again it would be crucial that the evidence we gather here inform future digital transformation policies. As a funder and as a policy advisor, sometimes we really think this is important to get out of any project, and especially of this one.
Fantastic. And if I can be slightly cheeky and add an extra kind of perspective from myself, then I think one of the things that I fear around CDR, and I hope that people don't see it as a bit, Jessica, going back to your point of something onerous or bureaucratic, as telling them they can't do things. That's not what it's about. And I think, Elaine, you were spot on in what you've just said, which is there are some big challenges, environment and climate change being kind of at the forefront of many kind of people and many conversations. But CDR should be around a framework that helps organizations innovate and solve some of those problems. And it's not to say that every SME out there will immediately go and solve climate change as an example, but it's in their industry, in what they do, in the impacts they have and the interaction with people and communities and territories and the planet as a whole, that they at least can evidence that they're helping. They're doing something positive, innovating with the technologies that are evolving around us. And as we said earlier, those technologies are evolving at such a pace that people have to engage. They have to engage to understand. Otherwise, they're at risk of disruption. And therefore, I applaud everything you're doing, both of you and everyone else involved in the programme. Fantastic to be involved in even a small way in terms of having a conversation like this. And I will say, please come back towards the end of the year and perhaps let's kind of then understand a bit more about what's been found out and how people have evolved in that time. But it's been a pleasure to talk to you both on the podcast. Thank you both for coming along.
Thank you, Rob. And thanks, Elena. It was great to speak to you both.
Thank you, Jessica.